Last year, American companies like Target and Budweiser waded into the culture war and promoted transgenderism. Of course, the American people pushed back, and both companies suffered major losses in their stock values. But what do you do if a company targets conservative organizations or individuals? What do you do if they punish those individuals for their political or religious beliefs and debank them? I'm Richard Nelson, host of The Commonwealth Matters. And to talk further about the politicization of businesses and how to push back is former Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron, who is the CEO of the 1792 Exchange, an organization dedicated to protecting free speech, free exercise of religion, and free markets. Daniel, welcome to The Commonwealth Matters.
Richard, it's always good to see you, and albeit in a different capacity, thank you for having me on, and always good to be with your viewers and your listeners.
Yeah. And hey, speaking of different capacities, I wish that you were still serving in state government, but the Lord did not intend that to be. But I'm still so glad, Daniel, to see you involved with public policy, especially leading an organization like the 1792 Exchange. And as I recall, sometime after the election, you weren't sure what you were going to do. You ran a very good gubernatorial race on the Republican ticket, came up a little bit short. But tell us, pick it up from there. How did you get tapped to lead the 1792 Exchange?
Well, Richard, as I share with people, whether it was privately or on the campaign trail, I talk a lot about, my identity wasn't in the title of Attorney General. And even if I was given the opportunity to serve as governor, my identity wouldn't be in the title of governor. It's as a Christ follower. And so the day after the loss, I committed that night in my concession speech. I said, look, Mackenzie and I are going to continue to follow the Lord and be try to be his hands and feet. Now, the day after the election, I didn't know exactly what that was going to look like. But I got a call from a friend who said that I needed to be introduced to 1792 Exchange. And oh, wow, what a blessing it's been to serve at 1792 as the CEO. Our organization is about making sure that corporations move back to neutral, that corporations ultimately get back to being about the business of business. Calvin Coolidge said at one point in a speech that he gave that the business of America is business. And what I think he was trying to capture with that comment was the sentiment that, this country, as it relates to its progress and its focus in the business community, should be creating and producing high quality products that folks domestically and frankly internationally will want. So whether you are producing a high quality product, whether you are in the business of customer service and providing good care and service, let that be what leads and focuses your organization. But sadly, what we've seen in some regard over last several years is corporations tilting towards more progressive and far left ideology and speaking out on those things. We are reminded of the fact that when in Georgia they decided to put forth some legislation that would secure their elections, Major League Baseball decided to boycott and didn't have the All-Star game in Georgia simply because they were told and under the impression, because of the corporate world and because of a lot of far left interest, they decided to get out of Georgia. And it was a decision that was terrible because it hurt a lot of small businesses in that community. You saw Disney last year, when Florida and their legislature decided to put forward a common sense law that would protect kids from hearing about things, frankly, that they don't need to hear about at an early age. You saw Florida come out against that reasonable piece of legislation. And so we have seen here within the last few years, corporations, hedge fund managers come out very strongly against kind of traditional values, what I would call Main Street values. And so 1792 Exchange is raising its hand to say, hey, we want corporations to get back to neutral. And I'm excited to be a part of this organization and this mission, and I'm going to continue to do it.
Daniel, as you were sharing the examples of big businesses, Major League Baseball, Disney, targeting conservative policies, I think back of one of the first big efforts to target a state because of conservative public policy. I'd say practical public policy was North Carolina. A few years back, they passed a bathroom bill to keep young boys who identified as girls out of the girls' bathrooms in the K through 12 public schools. And at that time, PayPal was looking to relocate its headquarters to one of the big cities in North Carolina. And then some other organizations got involved. I think the NCAA and some others also, where they put North Carolina lawmakers and leaders in a box to defend what, quite frankly, wouldn't have been issues just 5-10 years ago. And this is an example, I think, along the lines of what you were sharing, of big organizations, businesses with a far left agenda coercing, if you will, whether it's policymakers or others involved. Daniel, you said in a news release that you're going to shine a bright light on those whose ideological agendas seek to dismantle American freedom and prosperity, and to stop investment management firms, elected officials, and corporate interests from using other people's money to advance their radical political agendas. So here's the question. How do big corporations go about doing this? Of course, they have stockholders. They're publicly traded on Wall Street. But how do they hide what they're doing from the stockholders who I would guess they'd be opposed to this kind of thing? But what are you finding in your work there? What are they doing to keep this from the stockholders?
Well, I will trace it back to experience I had as Attorney General. I heard a major asset manager, head of BlackRock, a gentleman named Larry Fink, say at one point that he wanted to be a part of a coalition that ended the fossil fuels industry by 2030. This was in conjunction with the Biden administration that I think has said somewhere between 2030 and 2050, they want to destroy the fossil fuels industry. Well, as your listeners have heard me say before, in Kentucky, because of coal and natural gas, fossil fuels, we have a competitive advantage that attracts businesses because we can offer low cost and reliable energy through that coal and natural gas. Those companies and organizations and businesses are attracted to coming to our state. And so when you hear a asset manager want to rid the world, perhaps just rid the United States, because if you look at sort of their global sort of investments, they're okay with, foreign adversaries having fossil fuels, but not so much the United States. But that's another topic. But at the end of the day, my ears perked up at hearing they wanted to destroy the fossil fuels industry. And in many ways, a lot of this has been what I would consider virtue signaling, meaning they've been using the pension funds of teachers, firefighters, and police officers and other folks to ultimately boycott and prohibit investment in coal and natural gas, again, to the detriment of the holders of those investments, meaning that typically coal and natural gas companies perform decently when it comes to shareholder returns. Well, if you take that away as a part of the investment portfolio, you're actually hurting the teachers and firefighters and police officers. And 9 times out of 10, a lot of the public, folks at home, don't recognize this. They trust that their pensions are being managed properly. They trust that those that are in charge of those pensions have their best interests at heart and that they are fiduciaries of that money. But a lot of these asset fund managers are attempting to serve two masters. They're attempting to serve the far left agenda that wants to destroy the coal and natural gas industry, that wants to sort of change our value system in this country and change the fabric of this nation, and trying to serve their customers or the shareholders or the retirees. In my view, you cannot serve two masters. And that is what we've seen time and time again with these asset fund managers. And so the more light that you shine on these asset managers, the more light that you shine on corporations that have decided to wade into these topics and get into political debates, the more shareholders, the more customers aren't going to like it. And so that's ultimately what we try to do at 1792 is, one, encourage corporations to steer back to neutral, but also encourage shareholders and customers to be aware of what these large corporations are doing. And that manifests itself at 1792 Exchange in databases that we have. We have what's called the corporate bias rating that demonstrates what risk are associated with particular companies because they've decided to go further and further left on political matters or policy matters. We have a proxy database that helps state officials know where pension dollars are going and helps investors know where shareholder proposals are going on some of these more political questions. And then finally, we try to make sure people know who is making the decisions at these corporations. And so we have a database that focuses on C-suite executives and board members in terms of sort of what biases do they have, what biases do they have that they bring to the table. Again, this is all with the idea that let's help corporations steer back to neutral and get away from some of this stuff, and also empower shareholders and customers with knowledge to help them make informed decisions as they go into the marketplace.
Kentucky is at a crossroads. We can choose to give in to the radical left, or we can choose to engage the culture in a God-honoring way.
I started the Commonwealth Policy Center because I believe that Christians have a responsibility to influence government and society to the glory of God. While the Commonwealth Policy Center's made a significant impact, our work isn't finished. If you'd like to join our movement working for timeless values, then head to our website.
To learn more, go to commonwealthpolicycenter.org.
If you're just tuning in, you are watching The Commonwealth Matters. I'm Richard Nelson, your host, here with former Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron, also the new CEO of the 1792 Exchange. Daniel, you just mentioned the Spotlight report that you produced last year. In it, you analyzed the corporate behavior of over 2,500 companies. And in particular, you looked at the likelihood to cancel customers, suppliers, or employees for their political or religious beliefs. Of course, this is done at a national level. How much of an issue is this in Kentucky, where you have left-leaning companies that are cutting off relationships or punishing customers because of their political or religious beliefs?
Well, what our database is, and we're just as of a couple of weeks ago now up to 3,000 companies that we have reports on as it relates to what their biases are and what risk you run. And so we try to, in the most broad-based sense, give people, based on policies and pronouncements that have been made either as a corporation or the individuals that make up the leadership of those corporations, we try to paint a full picture of what that organization is like. And so that has been our focus. Obviously, one of the main things that we try to address is this fact that if you have traditional values, if you are a Christian, we want you to be aware of organizations that might have an approach to you that might marginalize or disregard your Christian values. And so that is something that we are keen on focusing on and making sure that people have that information so that they can make wise judgments about who they ultimately contract with or do business with the concern, as you noted, that they could be canceled. And an example that I will cite you to is the fact that recently USAA canceled John Eastman, debanked John Eastman because they didn't like his political affiliations, essentially. Again, this is something that we always have to be on guard against and aware of. And so that's what we try to do with our databases.
Very good. Daniel, on the far left, there's an organization called the Human Rights Campaign, been around a lot of years, and they do something similar to your Spotlight uh, index. They have something called the Corporate Equality Index measure. And they've looked at corporate policies, practices, and benefits, but only those that are related to lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer employees. That's according to their website. And they score companies. They give grades to companies, high grades for pro-LGBT policies, low grades to those who have more traditional family value policies. And clearly that's a narrow agenda. They're focused on LGBTQ issues. But this does work against conservative business owners and those business owners that might want to represent or advance conservative policies in their workplace. So would you say that the 1792 exchange is bringing clarity to companies like what the HRC campaign is doing? So what I'm seeing here, what I'm getting to, is I see what 1792 exchange is doing is kind of a counterbalance to what the HRC campaign is doing, except you're coming at it from a historical, conservative, traditional American perspective. Is that a good assessment of this?
Yeah, look, I think, Michael Jordan said it pretty aptly in the 90s, when he was asked about, why he didn't weigh in on specific topics or politics. His answer was pretty flatly, Republicans buy shoes too. And what I think he was trying to say is that, I want to be able to serve. I want to be able, when it comes to my tennis shoes, I want to be able to make the best tennis shoe and play the best basketball that I can and serve with my tennis shoe a multitude of people across ideological spectrums. And that's what I think he was trying to say with that comment. But sadly, what we've seen over the last couple of decades is corporations have decided to tilt their preferences in one way, and that is to the far left. Now, there are some standouts of companies that have decided to stay neutral and just focus on good quality products. But by and large, you have a lot of corporations that have decided to, in many ways, bend the knee to the Human Rights Campaign. They, as you note, have the Corporate Equality Index, and that index basically says the more woke you are, the better. And we actually at 1792 Exchange say that through our database, the corporate bias rating, the more you focus on business and return on investment to the shareholder and producing a high quality product, that's better for our society and for our communities. And so we really do stand as a counter to the efforts of the Human Rights Campaign to make corporations steer further and further to the left. And look, I will tell you, when it comes to, over the last couple of years, the far left's move on corporations and the way in which they've approached it's been through what's called the environmental social governance movement, ESG, if you will. And earlier this year, to give you a sense of whether the efforts to push back and to get corporations back to neutral is working, I would say yes, because the Wall Street Journal had an article here recently entitled ESG is a dirty word. And we are seeing more and more corporations be mindful of and sensitive to the fact that there are customers that they are serving, that there are shareholders that are invested in their companies that simply want the organization or the corporation to steer clear of politics and be focused on making high quality products.
Dan, you said in another interview that at the end of the day, ESG is an acronym that really is about destroying this country's energy independence and bolstering the ability of our foreign adversaries to make us dependent on their energy resources. Of course, you engaged this issue while you were serving as Kentucky's Attorney General. Let's bring this home to Kentucky. Have you seen ESG policies hurt Kentucky coal and gas producers or related companies?
Well, look, I will tell you that there are a lot of coal industry folks and a lot of natural gas folks and a lot of uh, leadership within the energy community that will tell you it is hard in the current environment, whether it's because of the Biden administration or the efforts of asset managers. It is hard to build coal-fired plants anymore, simply because it's hard to get investment, it's hard to get capital to flow into building those plants. And so I know there's been significant impact, um, but it's incumbent upon all of us, whether it's myself in this current role or in my previous role as Attorney General. I think it's incumbent upon our state elected office holders to fight for the interests and the competitive advantage of Kentucky. And that means standing up and preserving our fossil fuels industry, our natural gas and coal. And I'll give you an example of somebody who does this. That's somebody I happen to know pretty well, a gentleman by the name of Robbie Mills, who has committed to making sure that we stand up for traditional Main Street values and preserving and protecting our coal and natural gas industry. And so we have those fighters within government that are doing that. And as 1792, what we want to do on the outside is just make sure we're educating people so that they know. Again, the more light you bring to an issue, the more you spotlight a particular challenge, it can be addressed. And that is what 1792 is about, making sure that we empower people with information so that they can make good decisions as it relates to investments, as it relates to being a business that's contracting with particular vendors, or being simply a consumer and being mindful of where you shop and where you spend money.
Daniel, I want to talk about some of the big businesses that are punishing conservatives or conservative organizations. JP Morgan Chase debanked, stopped business with a Kansas-based nonprofit led by former Kansas Senator Sam Brownback. They simply sent them a letter and said, you no longer have an account here. They sent them what was the balance of the account. And when Senator Brownback sought answers, he didn't get anything right away. But when he pushed, he finally got a response from them saying that if they provided a list of donors and the candidates that that organization might support, then they would consider doing business with them again. Clearly, that was a contradictory to Chase's non-discrimination policy. But here's my question: is that an outlier example of big business punishing conservatives? Again, Sam Brownback, very credible person, led a nonprofit group that dealt with religious freedom, and yet he was punished because of his involvement with that. Again, was that a one-off outlier, or is it more widespread than we realized?
Oh, look, I think we have to be on guard and vigilant against that sort of conduct and activity. Obviously, I point you to and cite the example of USAA making a judgment and a decision to debank John Eastman because of obviously, it won't come out and make this pronouncement, but made a decision to debank John Eastman, and obviously John Eastman has been very involved in supporting President Trump and other political causes. Also, point you to the fact that there are just corporations that, because of the Corporate Equality Index, because of the Human Rights Campaign, they are making judgments that are hurting the bottom line of their companies. For instance, Target, when they put forward clothing in the front of their store that was something that was jarring to most parents who are trying to protect their kids and raise their kids in a manner that allows them to address some of these more challenging questions that come as it relates to gender and all those things. Target had a different mindset and put tuck friendly clothing in the front of their store, which is just something I think, again, as a parent, you're thinking, should that be in the front of a store? That hurt their sales. Look at what Bud Light did as it relates to Dylan Mulvaney, putting an ad out there that in many ways ultimately hurt their bottom line, because, again, a lot of folks that buy Bud Light don't want to be preached at about different issues related to gender. Again, if corporations get back to neutral, we can resolve a lot of these issues that exist. And again, it is important for folks, particularly Christians, to be on guard and vigilant as it relates to the debanking phenomena that has occurred. And so that's why we encourage you at 1792, again, look at the banks that we have listed there and see, who is high risk and who is low risk as it relates to your Christian principles and values.
Daniel, we are running out of time. It sounds like you're having an impact on pushing back against the far left agenda, infiltrating large corporations. You've only been at it for 6 months. Do you have any other good news you want to end on, or some goals that you have before you close out the year? Again, just 6 months into being CEO of 1792 Exchange. Share some any other good news you want to leave us on.
Well, what I want to say from on the front end is that obviously we want to help corporations, and so we want to walk alongside them to make sure they get back to neutral. This isn't about beating up anybody over the head or making someone a villain. This is about helping and encouraging corporations to get back to neutral. And so that's what we'll be focusing on for the remainder of this year, is engaging constructively with corporations and standing alongside them as they try to steer back to neutral. The other thing that I want to do is continue to have conversations like this to get the word out about 1792 and our databases. We want, again, folks to use them if they are investors, if they are owners of small businesses, if they're consumers. There is information that you can utilize to help you as you make decisions in those areas. If you're a state official, please look at our databases to help you draw conclusions on different policy matters as well. And then we're just going to continue to chip away at what the far left has been trying to do in our corporations. And I'm excited to work alongside a small but mighty team to do that, and work with allies and others to continue to impress upon our corporate ecosystem that we got to get back to the business of business, and we got to steer back to neutral. And that's what I'm going to be working on for the remainder of this year.
All right. Daniel Cameron, CEO of the 1792 Exchange, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you all for tuning in to The Commonwealth Matters. Please tell your friends about us. And for the podcast version, please go to your favorite podcast platform and rate us. That greatly helps us. God bless you, and tune in next time.